Hello and welcome to the Choirlosophy Podcast. This is episode 54, Choir Teacher TikTok and Tips for Social Media Use for Educators with Katherine Rosenfeld. We are now in a time in which the line between our day-to-day lives and our social media lives are becoming ever harder to keep separate. Almost like a living business card, we are curating public personas that for some people are the closest they will ever come to knowing the real you or the real me. As teachers, we are citizens of the world just like everyone else and are not immune to this rapidly changing landscape. The pandemic has only increased the amount of time we spend on social media, and Katherine Rosenfeld has been winning this game as far as I can tell. She has managed to create a truly positive, professional, and fun web persona. As a new teacher, she is seeking ways to stay connected with her students, whether in or out of the classroom. So I invited her on to just talk about how that's evolved for her. What does that look like? And what lessons has she learned from being so active on social media and using that, the kind of the do's and don'ts of using that within her environment as an educator with creating relationships with her students? It was just a really fun conversation. And as you all know, I'm very active on social media as well. And I've been around a little while and have seen that evolution. And so she and I just bounce our ideas off of each other. So stick around and I think you're going to enjoy it. Have you renewed your Sight Reading Factory membership yet this year for you and all of your students? If not, get started. It's not ever too late, in my opinion, to give your students the gift of confident literacy and the empowerment that that brings. It's amazing what happens when you really start to see the growth and you see that confidence build in their eyes. You can always use Choirlosophy at checkout to get 10% off your whole order. For a school's order, that's a big savings, and you can use that code every time you renew each school year. Okay, everybody, we're going to try something I've never done before on the show, and I probably won't do it every time, don't worry. But I thought this would be kind of fun. We're going to read the comments on the Apple Podcast app from DK Maestro. 5 stars. This is an excellent podcast for anyone who has an interest in choral music. The guests and topics are current and relevant, and the host, Chris Muntz, is not only passionate about the topic, but an engaging interview. A much-needed podcast for choral musicians. Thank you, DK. Thank you. That's very nice. Another 5-star from Pachiridu. Chris continues to inform and educate on a number of relevant topics and conversations. His guests are fabulous, and they share applicable information that have absolutely made my teaching better. Bottom line, I look forward to every episode that drops. Thank you for this amazing podcast. Oh, this is going so well. Don't worry, there are some not as good ones later. Number 3, a 5-star. Informative and thought-provoking. This is from R blah blah. These are, of course, the anonymous screen names that you put in your Apple Podcast apps. Love the podcast. Please keep doing what you are doing. Okay sign emoji. Great perspective from Clay Fordo. And this is, says, thank you so much for what you do for the choral world. No, thank you, Clay. And then one particularly on episode 28. I've never done this. Like I said, this is going back a while. My mind is blown in such a good way. It makes me want to learn more and really understand overtones. I really appreciate the accessible ideas that I can implement right away. And the idea of rainbow ears is revelatory. Stay tuned to the end. That was the episode with Don Bringer. I agree. One of my faves. Okay, now a 4-star review. And this one I actually responded to on Facebook, but I didn't hear on the show. He said it was the best. It's the best. However, the information in this podcast is top notch, but I've learned so much, and I appreciate the wide variety of topics. Okay, here's the only criticism. Would it be possible to improve the sound quality? It sounds like you're in a tin can. Okay, so that was May. For the audiophiles in the audience, I have tried quite a bit of experimentation since May to make the sound quality better, and I think I have, but you can go back and check. You let me know. Another one, just what I needed, 5 stars, keep up the great work. 5 stars, I'm sold. And then this one was one of the very first reviews. I love this, a 1-star review. There were 25-star reviews before the podcast was even launched. That is fraudulent and reeks of dishonesty. I can't tell which is worse, the audio quality or the rampant ego. This guy, Muncie, is so full of it. He names his students in his podcasts and shares personal stories about them. Again, a gross lack of sense of self. Nobody cares about what he has to say, so he makes the guests listen to his stories. I love that. First of all, I don't name the students in the podcast. If anything, I make up names for them if I tell stories about them. And then going on to thought-provoking 5 stars, I have really enjoyed listening to this podcast. I think as quality music educators, it is vital to know what we are doing and why we are doing it to help our students really understand the what and the why. Chris does a really good job of bringing topics that help with that self-reflection. And then this has got to be one of my students. There is no months, there is only mungus. I don't even know what that means. And then, wow, this is the best ding dang podcast I have ever heard. This turned my life around. This has to be one of my students. Only a teenager would type best ding dang podcast. This turned my life around. I used to be depressed, but now I'm not. Thank you, Christmas. Okay, so you get an idea. I always love seeing the comments, and I actually enjoy the critical ones as well because they help make the show better. So head over to the Apple Podcast app or whatever app you use and leave a rating, leave a comment. Thanks. Now on to the regular interview. And of course, I know from a recent TikTok of yours that I should not call you Kat. So I will call you Katherine. Special thanks to the producers over at Patreon, Ulrich Igrain Munoz Alarcon, Chandler Smith, David Kowalczyk, James Mock, Kyle Peterson, Michael Herron, Ryan Main, and Steve and Kathy Kakachik. Okay, everybody, I'm here with Katherine Rosenfeld, and I came across Katherine on her TikTok, which for those of you who are older choir teachers, that's a social media app. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And I wanted to talk to her about the idea of active social media use for teachers. And this is something that I've been kind of observing over the last decade or so of my life and how that has affected my relationship with students. So I thought, who better to talk to about this than our very own Katherine Rosenfeld, TikTok star, choral music educator. So Katherine, welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
This is going to be fun. So first, why don't you just tell us a little bit about you so that we have your background?
Absolutely. So my parents met singing in church choir. So it was kind of required that everyone in my family at least gave singing a try. Grew up singing in church, grew up singing in the Phoenix Children's Chorus as well. So I have some really important mentor teachers from that time in my life, from 4th grade all the way up through when I graduated high school. Went to Horizon High School, which is a big show choir program in the Valley. I mostly stuck to classical, but have a little experience with the show choir world, which is fun. And then went to Northern Arizona University. So I have the privilege of calling Edie Copley and Ryan Holder my mentors. They are wonderful people, and they prepared me really well for my student teaching, which I completed back down in Phoenix in the Mesa area. Did 8 weeks with high school, 8 weeks with middle school. Really, really loved both experiences, but really felt that at least for the beginning of my career was definitely called to the middle school aspect. And then as I finished up my student teaching through a connection I made at Beer Choir, which I love that part of the story, I was contacted about a job that was opening up at Arizona School for the Arts, a part-time middle school choir position. So I have 7th and 8th graders at a school that is 5 through 12, and I teach choir in the afternoons. And then since I am currently part-time, also run a private voice studio, am the soprano soloist at actually the church I grew up in. So they hired me back. They didn't hate me, which was nice. And then also do some other part-time work and sing still every once in a while for Dr. Holder and his Sedona Academy of Chamber Singers. So keep singing, keep active. And then also, yes, I am on TikTok and Instagram.
That's awesome. And of course, I'll be sure to link to your accounts. So a couple stories I'll start out with to kind of give folks an idea of why I thought this would be a fun conversation to have. So one background story that I did not share with you is that I have a strong Sedona connection.
Okay.
And that is probably of all of the places in the world outside of Kansas City where I'm from that I've spent the most time is Sedona, because I got married there. We go there probably once a year. So I'm very familiar with the area. So that's exciting. It's in fact, Northern Arizona University. I've been saying this for years. I know no one there. I don't know anyone there. I don't know the program at all. However, it's my dream retirement job to teach adjunct there. just because I want to live there. Like I just want to be in the mountains of northern Arizona. So for someone from there, you're probably like, why? But
Actually, yeah, leaving Flagstaff was hard. There are two public high schools in Flagstaff, so the teaching scene there is a little challenging. It doesn't really bode well to stay there after you graduate, but Northern Arizona holds such a special place in my heart. I go back up as often as possible.
yeah, I love it. I love it. And then the other is just my experience with TikTok. So we'll start there since that's where I found you. At the very beginning of the lockdowns in March, I made a TikTok. I started ticking some talks, you might say. But I got bored like really quickly. I'm not creative enough to create those, the videos. I think it's probably similar. It's an age thing. I tried snapping some chats at one point as well. Super bored. I think it's the whole putting words on the screen and trimming your videos and all that kind of stuff. I would much prefer just staring into a microphone like I'm doing right now and talking, or on Snapchat in particular, I'm like, why am I not just texting you this? Like I could just text you all this stuff. So I did make one. And now I have come to appreciate I'm what you might call a TikTok stalker, where I don't really make them anymore. I think the last one I made was like back in June or something like that. But I will scroll through the For You page, probably, first 10 videos, and then I'm done for the day. And so one of yours came up on there, because of course I've probably looked at some other choir people and found that. And I found the interesting thought started to creep into my mind of, okay, so TikTok is where all the kids are. You're a teacher, and that means your kids are probably on TikTok, and they probably see a lot of this stuff. And so then I started wondering if you interact with kids that way, and has that changed or created avenues for you to connect with students?
Yeah, it definitely has. I downloaded TikTok about probably the same time that you did, early mid quarantine. And that was actually really tough for me because I was trying to connect with students who had only been mine for 8 weeks. After spring break, we didn't come back, and I started that job that I have now in January.
Mm-hmm.
So I just asked students, I mean, that is a daze. I can barely tell you what content I taught fourth quarter when lockdown hit. But it was really just about connecting with my students. And, ask them, what are you doing? What are you doing to stay sane, staying at home with your siblings who are annoying or whatever it may be? And so many of them were like, we're on TikTok. And I said, well, I'll just download the app and just look at it. I had the same intention that you did. Just look and see what this is, because the ads that were showing up on Facebook and Instagram did not make the app appealing to me at all. But I quickly realized that there were lots of different sides of TikTok, you call it. So sometimes I'll end up on food TikTok, but I very quickly ended up on teacher TikTok and saw that there were people who were using this to connect with their students. So it wasn't my intention when I first downloaded it necessarily to be a presence for my students in that way, just to kind of see what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it became like a thing that Rosenfeld was on TikTok. And I told my principal very early, especially as I had other teacher friends, and they invited me to kind of be part of collaborations. And I saw like potential for growth in my account. I was like, I need to sooner than later make sure that this is upfront with my admin, double checked our social media policies just to make sure I wasn't violating anything there. And my students now pretty much all follow me. So I post content with the knowledge that my students follow me. I will answer their comments. I will not answer DMs from students. So my TikTok is set up that there's like a filter on. So I don't follow my students back. I don't follow anyone who's under 18. There'll be a filter on, so they'll get dumped in. If they try to DM me, it gets dumped into like people you don't follow trying to DM you. And if I see it's one of my students, I just delete it. You can email me if you need me. That is the avenue we're expected to communicate with. But I figure if it's a comment, it's something that anyone could log on and see. My principal could log on and see. Their parents could log on and see. So it's right there out in the open. And it's oftentimes just like, haha, this was about our class. And I'll say, haha, it was, it's nothing that I would hide from anyone ever.
Right. So yeah, so that's awesome. And this is the part that I wanted to kind of slide in there too. And just to give the historical context, because, I'm old and I've been doing this a while. And when I first started teaching, this will be like your music history class, but social media history class here.
I'll take notes.
MySpace was the thing when I started teaching. And I remember so back then there were no rules for how teachers should behave on social media because it was so brand new that districts hadn't yet created a policy, for example. And I didn't know what it was either. So I remember making a MySpace page, having no idea that my students would be on there and that I might see something they did and they might see something I did. And I was, 22 and when I first started teaching. And so I made one. I was like, okay, my friends in college are making these and, I'll make one. And then I remember it all went downhill from there when I saw one of my students post a picture peeing on the toilet. And I was like, how am I seeing this right now? There was no content filter going on back then at all. Okay. So then, of course, there was this big backlash because lots of stuff happened in the early 2000s with just all these kind of inappropriate interactions with students and teachers on social media. And then the district started making these rules. This is about 2007, 2008. And so then at that point, we were pretty much being told in the education community, just don't interact with students on social media at all. Don't let them see what you do. Don't block everything, make it private, all this kind of stuff. And then people kind of chilled out, 7 or 8 years later, where now it's like, okay, there are boundaries, but it's not, the worst thing. So I share that because I thought it'd be interesting to kind of share how your experience with it coming into teaching in the more recent years when social media is fully entrenched in society, like everybody's got it. It's not some weird thing like it was when I was younger, where people have to kind of sniff around the water hole to see if it's safe, that kind of thing. And so what I discovered once all that freak out happened, that I became active on Twitter. And where my account, the rule in my district is that kids and students can see what I post as long as on any social media, as long as I don't make anything private. So in other words, if the parents can see what the kids are seeing, then it's fine. So we'd have a similar rule, I guess, with what you had just said, where DMs, no DMs. But if somebody drops a comment on a picture I put on my Instagram or something, as long as the parents of that kid could go see that interaction too, then everything's above board. And what I've discovered over the years of making my social media wide open the way I do now is that I feel like in a lot of ways it humanized me as a teacher to my kids. I started having better relationships with them because they saw me as a person. Have you come across that feeling at all? Do you have that instinct as well?
I do. I mean, it's really hard. I have joked in a lot of aspects of my kind of first year that it's very hard to know what is going well for me because it's actually going well and what is coincidental and what is going poorly because we're on Zoom and what is going poorly because I'm a first year teacher. It's very hard to eliminate variables right now. But I do think that when I'm in front of people and I'm a warm body in the room, connecting with students was not difficult, but connecting with students over Zoom was very, very, very difficult. So I do think that especially right now, that has humanized me and created that avenue for just further connection with my students. And I do, definitely find that it's been really, really helpful.
Have you been to ryanmain.com yet? If you are a teacher of young singers, middle school, high school in particular, he's a master at engaging kids with the music that he writes. I did 2 of his pieces this year, even during the most bizarre semester ever during a pandemic, and the kids just loved the pieces that we did. We did The Future Now and The Birth of Music, which are 2 fantastically exciting, dramatic pieces, which the beautiful thing about Ryan's music is that it's interesting and multi-layered, but it's also accessible. So I find it to be very successful in my classroom with my students and getting them to hear themselves right away as sounding good, but then there's so much to work on later. It's not fluff. It's the perfect combination for my high school kids, in my opinion. And the cool thing about Ryan's music is when you enter Choreolosophy at checkout, you get 10% off. You also then own the PDF, which means that when you do it 3 or 4 years from now, you still own it. You don't have to go back and buy more copies, which is a beautiful thing. So head over to ryanmain.com and use Choreolosophy at checkout on his music. Yeah. In fact, that's like I said earlier, it's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this, because I knew that you're young and not in a condescending way, but that your career started in this probably the weirdest time ever to start teaching, number one. And number two, that other aspect of the social media already being kind of entrenched in society, and kind of a way to bounce our experiences off of each other in that way. So, are there any, of course, protecting names and all of the things that you would want to do? Are there any stories that you could share where a TikTok experience led to a connection?
I think I could answer that in a lot of ways. If you're talking about my students, they love, so I send out every other week because I would like to just throw out social media is one of a lot of ways that I try to connect with my students. It's the one we're focusing on today, but obviously there are students who are not allowed on TikTok and
Right.
or are not allowed to follow me. Their parents said that's not okay. And obviously that's fine. So we have lots and lots of ways we connect. One of the ways is every other week I send out a survey of just how are you doing as a person? It has nothing to do with music. It's not a test. It's just, are you okay right now? Because life is weird. And then I just leave some blank space at the end for them to talk about whatever. And oftentimes their feedback is, I love watching your TikToks, or like, I just feel like that is often something that comes up as just a way that my students feel connected to me. And their parents, sometimes I have a few parents who follow me and they just feel like they kind of know the teacher as a person a little bit more, which is cool. So I think that those connections are really cool. And then professionally, I've made friends with so many amazing teachers who are on the app. And I've had several DMs. Part of the reason I leave that filter on is that sometimes there will be pending DMs that are intriguing or with adults that I would want to answer. And I've had a lot of people who are studying music education who said that they considered dropping the major in 2020 and that something about my content made them stick with it. So that has been, I would say that is probably one of the coolest things, other than connecting with my own students, just knowing that there are people who needed to laugh or smile. My TikToks are never very serious or earth-shattering, but they tend to make people smile. And that is what is important.
Yeah, now that doesn't surprise me, actually. I want to drill down on that a little bit, the experience you have with music education students, because I can see trying to put, trying to put on my empathy hat, where I put myself in the shoes of somebody who's your age or maybe a couple years younger, and they're looking ahead at the world. And 3 years ago, I knew I wanted to be a choir teacher, but now I'm looking at what being a choir teacher actually looks like and what it means on a day-to-day basis. And I'm thinking, a job at Home Depot sounds great, or whatever it is. And and I can see also from that perspective, kind of getting on a social media app that all your friends are on, or TikTok or Instagram or whatever, and seeing somebody like yourself, not necessarily, kind of like you said earlier, you're not mastering anything because you're brand new at this and you're trying to figure out how to, but you seem to be having fun doing it, and you seem to be making a difference for someone. And for a lot of us, I don't know, I think this is probably not a generational thing. We all get into teaching because we want to make a difference for somebody. Like, that's why we do it. And so I think that's a really cool thing that you're doing there, especially because that didn't even dawn on me, honestly. The music education student that might watch your TikTok, that's really cool. Let's talk about the creative process for you a little bit. How does a TikTok happen? This is where I'm stuck. This is why I don't make any, because I don't understand how, like, every idea that I think would be funny then stops being funny within 10 seconds of me filming it, and I delete it. So what do you do?
Well, with anything, it's so funny to call it the creative process because it really is just kind of a hobby, and it was a quarantine thing and it was a summer thing. And then it just became something that I just kept doing. So you scroll through the For You page and there are always trending things. The trends is another great way to stay connected with my students, because if I find trending music and I'm doing something where we're talking about our taste in music, or we can find an ostinato example in pop music or whatever it is, to be on top of like the trending thing on TikTok, because anyone who knows middle schoolers know that those trends are like milliseconds long. If you can stay on top of whatever the trend is, you are so cool in the eyes of middle schoolers. I'm like, okay, I don't know why that song is so important to you for these 11 seconds, but it is. So doing that research, scrolling through the For You page, seeing what other creators are doing, what sounds are trending. I try to not play the numbers game. I really do not care. If you look at some of the really well-followed teachers, my following is nothing in comparison. So I'm not obsessed with like staying on top of the trend. But if I find an audio or something and I have an idea for it, or I have something I want to respond to or something I want to talk about. It's really inspired a lot by what other content creators are doing. Sometimes I just want to do something silly. One of my favorite TikToks was I started class a different way every day and just filmed the first like couple seconds. It would technically be passing period, so it wasn't like class time just yet. And just doing something really random, like playing the recorder super poorly as my students came in, or opening one of those, I don't even know what they're called, like brands balls that they were super into for a while, and just doing random things and just kind of sharing little pieces of my life teaching, and putting fun audio under it and calling it a day. I don't know that there's a particularly, structured process that I would follow, an artistic process. It's just kind of fun. And whenever it comes to me, I post something.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's probably my problem. It seems like I might be overthinking it. So what you do is you just, as it comes to your mind, you create it. Now this could be generational also, in that the same reason I gave up on Snapchat. That if there's TikTok involves all that like editing on your phone, and so you've got to be thumb talented. And I'm not thumb talented. I'm pretty good with editing on my big computer here, but the phone intimidates me. So I don't know if you what your thoughts on this are, but what about the other social media apps? And are you into them also? And if so, do you use them in different ways? Like, do you have different roles for your different social media?
So I would first just like want to put the line between private accounts and public accounts. So I have a private Facebook and a private Instagram. And those things, I don't post anything that I wouldn't want my principal to see, anything like that. I would say the one big line that I draw is I don't talk about alcohol ever on public posts, but I will sometimes on private, not in a crazy way, but just like,
Right.
I'm not opposed to having a glass of wine and like, a Facebook post.
Uh-huh.
Because that's family, that's friends, that's all people I know personally. And same thing with my private Instagram. So that serves that purpose in my life. It is not related to my life teaching unless my kids do something particularly hilarious that I want to share with the world. And then there's my public account. So I have a public Instagram and a public TikTok. And those I keep very clean. The knowledge that I have parents on there, I have professionals on there, I have, future teachers on there who want to follow my content for different reasons. I would say my TikTok is primarily silly. And part of the reason I'm not obsessed with playing the numbers game is because you kind of do want to like fit into a certain bubble. Sometimes my stuff is not about teaching. It'll just be something silly that I wanted to do. And so my TikTok is primarily just very silly. And then my Instagram, I have kind of a mix. My Instagram following is always in flux because sometimes I'll go super academic and sometimes I'll go super silly. So I will post my TikToks to Reels, which is the new feature on Instagram that basically allows you to upload up to 35 seconds. And most people that I have come across are just putting their TikToks on Reels. I haven't ever come up with an idea just for Reels. I've never put something on Reels originally. I've never edited in Reels. I've just put TikToks on there, which is what I see most people doing.
Uh-huh.
But then as far as like, if you were to go to my Instagram page, I have story highlights where I talk about different activities that have worked in my classroom and that sort of thing. So I use that a little bit more professionally, but I try to not box anything in too much because for me, that stops being fun. And it's not necessarily about building a big following or building anything other than relationships is not really that important to me. So that's kind of how I use them.
Right. Okay. So for you, students and families of school-related people could see your TikTok in general, and they could see a public version of your Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
But that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean,
Okay.
I have a few parents who know me personally. I accept Facebook friends requests from them because, again, I don't really post anything wild on any of my social medias. So.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting just getting different people's feedback on that question, because there is this idea that we've created since I was your age, whereas we've grown up with social media, where people put the different social media apps that they use in different boxes of here's what I use Twitter for, here's what I use Instagram for, that kind of thing. And it's interesting just to see how people formulate that, because it sounds like I'm making some similar choices to you. Just to give you an example, I use my Twitter to have kind of in-depth, nuanced political conversations and social conversations that I know if I tried to have that conversation on Facebook, it would be a nightmare.
Mhm.
an absolute nightmare. But then on Instagram, I would probably post pictures of like what I cooked for dinner for my kids and a picture of them enjoying it or whatever on Instagram, but I would never put that on Twitter because the people there would be like, why are you posting that? That kind of thing. And so that's an interesting thing. Have you, in it, as you've kind of dived deeper to TikTok, as is, what would you say you spend the most time doing stuff for TikTok? Is that your main vehicle?
Yeah, yeah, I would say that's the main one.
Okay. So when you're doing that, do you kind of think about, um, on the front end, and this is where what I'm really kind of curious about. On the front end, as you're making the video, do you think about how your students would perceive it, or is this really truly just your self-expression, and everything that happens when your students see it or like it is kind of just downstream from that?
I think it kind of depends on the TikTok. There are things where I really do have them in mind. I think it's something that they would enjoy, or it's something about our class. If I'm ever telling a story about a student, I want to make sure that it's A, as anonymous as possible,
Mm.
and B, always a positive, right? Always shedding positive light on them. I never want to do anything that could be perceived as me bashing on my students. So I have done things like my 5 favorite Halloween costumes my students told me they were dressing up as, just things that are objectively like will put a smile on people's faces, and my students will be excited if they were the ones mentioned. So in those moments, I really do. Other than that, I try to just be myself. My sister gave me the sweetest compliment the other day. She said, I feel like you're always Catherine. You are Catherine to your students. It's why I don't think I'm cut out for elementary, because I couldn't put on that hat, right? I just want to be Catherine. And so I don't feel like I'm really going outside of myself at all to be, what is this going to look like to my students? Of course, there are certain subject areas I wouldn't touch on TikTok that some people do because their following is totally different and they're not teachers. And then I'm also just conscious that it's something that I would wear in the classroom. Those are really the only things that I have those boundaries. But other than that, I'm just me.
Probably the nerdiest product that I plug on the Coralosophy podcast is Voce Vista Video. VoceVista.com/Coralosophy will allow you to download a software that will revolutionize your students' understanding of how sound works and what to listen for when they are singing. It is a overtone analyzer that can be projected up on your screen, or I've even used it during the pandemic in virtual modules because I can screen share it and show different things that are happening there. But basically, the value to a choir teacher is that it allows you to prove to the students what vowel they are singing, to prove to the students that they might be lacking resonance, because they can see it on the screen rather than you having to be the bad guy, which that's what I love about it the most. Because in my early years before this technology was in my hands, you're not singing ooh. Yes, I am. You're not singing oh. Uh-huh. And then I had to be the bad guy. I was like, no, your vowel is not correct. And there was always an argument. With Voce Vista, I can show it to them. I can show them what happens to the overtone spectrum when they actually move their mouth, when they make their lips round instead of just thinking that they're making their lips round. It's a great product. And the cool thing about it is if you head to vocevista.com/Coralosophy, you can download it for free, play with it for 30 days, decide if you want to make the investment. It's a $99 software, but with my discount code, it's $89, and it is money well spent. I highly recommend this product to add a layer and a dimension to your students' understanding about the voice. Okay, that's great. In fact, that's actually a perfect segue. It's like you read my mind to the last topic I was going to ask you to opine about. So, uh, in this idea of, I guess, where we are now with the type of teaching you've had to do in the beginning of your career, which is not normal, hopefully, and it's something that you'll be able to kind of look back on this time. And how do you see these lessons that you've learned? This is just, it's okay for you just to guess and make predictions about the future. But when you're back in the classroom on a regular basis, seeing kids every day or whatever your schedule is at your school, but it's fully in person and all of those things. Are there ways that you can see this TikTok skill that you've learned continuing to pay benefits for you 5 years from now?
Well, the first thing is I've made relationships with other teachers, and teachers outside my field. I think sometimes music educators are friends with music educators, and you go to an ACDA conference and you learn from other music educators, which is amazing. But the things that I have learned from a third grade general ed teacher about communicating with parents, that's definitely something I'm going to take forward. Or classroom management from people with more experience than me. Not every teacher on TikTok is 23. There are people with more experience under their belt than me. So I think that those relationships, I mean, there are people I now see being my friend for my whole career. So those people and continuing to have those resources to rely on is a huge thing. And then I think it also really highlighted the importance of having relationships with students and making them feel safe first and foremost. I mean, when this started, I was like, how am I going to get these kids to sing alone in their bedrooms on mute or sing unmuted for me one-on-one in a breakout room? Like, how are we going to do this? And just starting with relationships and making them feel safe. That's also something that they would put in those surveys a lot, is just that, like, I am a person that they feel comfortable going to. And as silly as it might sound to some people, I mean, part of that was that they knew me as a person through TikTok or through Instagram or wherever they're following me. So just to, like you were saying earlier, to really humanize myself, especially because a new teacher can come in and want to feel adult and look adult. I mean, I put on a blazer for this interview because I know that I look young and I want to make sure that I'm perceived as, a professional, but really it's so much more important that I'm perceived to them as a person if I'm going to ask them to sing for me, which is the most vulnerable thing that you can ask, especially a middle schooler, to do.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I agree. And it's the one thing I was going to observe about your reflection, your young but wise reflection, which is that you are figuring out a way in a very strange way right now, and that's not an insult. It's just the world we live in, to try to figure out how to show who Catherine is to your students, to be yourself in front of your students. And I've got to tell you, for me, when I was your age, I think it took me 3 years at the beginning of my teaching career to be able to finally stand in front of a choir and have the person standing in front of the choir be truly me, like where I was being myself without trying to put on a hat, put on a mask, put on a face that was, professional or was going to impress my students and the singers in the room, some kind of a fake version of me. And I can tell you from experience that I didn't become, well, I was a crap teacher until I figured out how to be myself in front of the kids. That's huge. And if you can figure out a way to do that now when all of your students are scattered in all kinds of different places, and can keep that aspect of it when you're face to face, you're going to be ahead of the game. Which is, that's important because they are so smart. The middle school age, 7th, 8th, ninth grade, they are so smart on that level. They're super stupid on other levels, but they're so smart on that level of they know when you're faking stuff with them. Like
Mhm.
they know when it's not real. And I think that's probably something generational too, that social media access for the kids has taught them, is they've grown up with it in their hands. They can tell when somebody's not natural in front of a camera, or
Yeah.
when they're not natural in front of people. Like they know when people are faking it. So it's an interesting thing. So I think you're sniffing up the right tree there. So on the way out, let's do this. Is there anything that about this experience that that maybe I just haven't given you a chance to say yet? What do people need to know? Let's say if you could put it this way, if there's a teacher out there listening to this that has been kind of nervous about being involved in social media stuff, what should they know?
Yeah, so I think I kind of briefly touched on this, but make sure you know what your school's social media policy is upfront. Um, that was something I feel like I did retrospectively because, again, I really did not think I was going to be using that app and having a public account. So once I realized that was the direction I was heading, I went back and looked. And we kind of know this about cybersecurity with our government. Policies cannot keep up with the rate that technology is progressing. And that's true in our school districts too. And so I'm pretty sure the wording at my school, and absolutely nothing against my school at all whatsoever, but I think most people would run into I think that the policy says use your best judgment. And so that is what I do. And I'm an educator first, and I care about my students first. And so that policy doesn't say don't have your kids in your TikTok, or it doesn't say don't post something dumb. It just says use your best judgment. And that's something that I know people have run into issues with if they push their best judgment a little too far and they go too far on the end of I'm trying to make good content for TikTok versus I'm trying to be a good educator. And so if I ever have something, I've used student voices before with parent consent to do that. And it was after school hours. And it wasn't visually that exciting. I let them roast me, and I put the camera on the other side of my laptop. So all you could see was me responding to their voices. But I've never had a student face in my TikTok because that, yeah. So just keeping that in mind, of course, being yourself. And I would say not being obsessed at all about what your numbers look like, anything like that. That's not interesting to people for you to talk about how your TikTok views are down. And just getting in there. I've had people ask if my students make fun of me at all. And I'm sure, some of them know I'm on the app and they choose to not follow me. They're like, I'm really on this side of TikTok and I don't really care about what you're doing. And that's fine. I don't embarrass particularly easily. So I'm sure some of them like giggle at what I'm doing or think I'm a bad dancer, and that's fine. So yeah, just not being afraid to be yourself. I kind of accidentally ended up on TikTok, and ending up in this interview where I'm talking about how I use social media. That's not something that was like a dream of mine. Sometimes I have future educators who are like, I started my teacher Instagram my sophomore year of college as a future educator, and I'm so excited about this. I did not start my Instagram. Like, I was not concerned about my Instagram or TikTok presence at all. So making sure, just especially to new educators who think that they follow people on Instagram who they think are really good educators, and they think that's so cool to have a TeacherGram, that cannot be your main focus when you're teaching. Just a word of caution to incoming educators, that if you're spending more time on the way you look on social media, that just make sure your kids are at the center of everything that you're doing.
Right. I agree. And I think that's something that you and I have in common. Of course, my medium is podcasting and yours is TikTok, but there is that common denominator of needing to, you mentioned not embarrassing easily. Every single opinion that I have about pretty much everything is public domain. Like, everybody can hear it. And that includes my students, and that includes my teachers that I work with, includes their parents of the kids. They can all come, if they want to know what Mr. Muntz thinks about something, they can go listen. Right. And so there is that certain aspect of, you have to have a thick enough skin to know that somebody might think that what you're doing is weird. Some students might think it's dumb, that kind of a thing. And so I think you are brave, and I think you're doing something really good. So I think, because there's a lot of ways that kids in this generation are connecting that are technology related, and they're growing up with it. So let's get on board. So thank you so much for coming on and explaining all of that. And this is going to be fun. And I will definitely be following it. I'm sure everybody who's listening to this will go try to figure out what a TikTok is. And we'll come and check out your stuff in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, as always, for sticking around to the end of an episode. I always appreciate those of you who are the diehards that make it all the way to the end. Podcast metrics are such that you are a rare breed. So thank you for staying all the way to the end of the episode and listening. And I hope that you found that informative and fun. There are tons of ways that you can become a part of the conversation in one way or the other on the Coralosophy podcast. So let me tell you a little bit about that on the way out. You can, of course, go to coralosophy.com and leave a message in the form there on the main page about something you heard on the show, or something you'd like to add to the show. There's also the Coralosophers Facebook page, where you can talk freely about things that you heard on the show, whether you agree with me or disagree, or agree with a guest or not. The only rule there is we just treat each other with respect. So head on over there and participate in that way if you can. Also, if you enjoy the show, you can go to Patreon, patreon.com/Coralosophy, and help me keep on top of the costs of the show. You can chip in for as little as $3 a month over there, get the private podcast feed, any supplemental materials. Right now, we've got a beginner's choral music rep list for all kinds of voices going that patrons can see. So that's a neat opportunity over there. And of course, liking, sharing, leaving ratings, all kinds of ways that you can help spread the word about the show that make getting this content out to listeners possible. Thanks, everybody.